Since 2003, this is the Sports Source, East Tennessee's #1 sports talk show.
Brought to you by Junk Be Gone and the Garza Law Firm.
With your host, John Pennington. The Sports Source starts now.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome into the Sports Source. Well, now we know. First, you close the gap on Arkansas. Then you close the gap on Alabama. Not a great night for Tennessee football last night as they lose 24-13 in Fayetteville to a first-year coach who was a coordinator. Basically, any argument you would make in favor of Jeremy Pruitt at this point, Sam Pittman kind of counteracts it. You can't make an excuse for Pruitt and then look at Pittman, because Pittman kind of exposes all of those as just excuses at this point. We will talk about excuses. We'll talk about real problems. We'll talk about where they go from here. And because we know a lot of people are talking about it, we'll discuss later if things go completely off the rails here. And I mean completely off the rails. Could Jeremy Pruitt and that staff be in trouble this season? This COVID-impacted, millions of dollars gone season. We'll discuss that. Let's get right into it. First segment of our program is brought to you by the Garza Law Firm. And if you're like me, you like to deal with local people. So many of our clients, we don't have a lot of big chains on our show. It's the local businesses. That's who I like to work with. Marcos Garza is a member of the community. There are a lot of ads now for legal firms, and if you look into it, it's like, okay, they're in Nashville, they're in Memphis, they're in Chattanooga, they're in Birmingham. Marcos Garza is here in East Tennessee, has been for years, will be for years to come. If you have a need for an attorney, visit garzalaw.com. Okay, want to welcome in the first wave of panelists we have today. We have VFL Will Overstreet right here, Jimmy Himes from WNML AM and FM, and right down there, Chuck Cavaleris, longtime sports writer in this town. Guys, I said preseason I would cut Jeremy Pruitt some slack because it's a COVID year, it's a weird year. Meaning, if they go 5-5 or even 4-6, which I thought they'd be pretty close to where they were, I could see maybe 6-4. Maybe they catch lightning in the ball and go 7-3. In my wildest dreams, I never thought we'd be sitting here looking at 3-7 or worse. So to me, that whole I'm going to cut him some slack for COVID, that's out the window. that was because you haven't had major outbreaks of COVID. You don't have that excuse. So to me, that was just that's a brutal, brutal loss in my opinion. What is your opinion? How big was that loss last night? Am I making too much of it? How big was that loss last night, and why?
You're not making too much of it. I mean, it's a pure and simple picture of two different programs going in two different directions. Sam Pittman brought his hogs, Pruitt brought slop. That's the pure way to see it. And when you look at this game, that's all anybody's going to remember. They're going to remember first-year coach, third-year coach. One of them had zero talent. One of them has a bunch of 5 stars. Been doing recruiting, supposedly pretty good. And what do you see on the field? You see one program that looks remarkably better. And in a team in a game that I guarantee if you played this game 10 times, the Vols might win 2. That other team is that much better than you right now. And so when you look at that, it says you don't have to write the obituary of what's happening right now. It's there. It's for everybody to see. There's no way to run from it.
How big was this?
I think it's a terrible look for Tennessee because, as Will pointed out, you got a guy in his first year who inherited a program that had lost 20 consecutive SEC games. So that was one issue. And you're in year 3, he's in year 1, and he's beating you. The other issue that you see is Tennessee in the second half has been awful. Did Arkansas make better halftime adjustments than Tennessee? A lot of that's coaching, right? The other thing is you have not resolved your quarterback situation, and you're in year 3. So I think all of those things, with Arkansas winning that game, I just think it's a really bad look for Tennessee right now.
And the schedule is different. It's not the schedule as last year, but last year you had that really tough stretch in October, right? And then you were able to hit the reset button and turn things around. That's how I looked at this game. You're at the crossroads of your season. You got an open date. You can get some young players ready. You can get some fundamentals worked out. You can go on the road. Arkansas is better, but they're not a world beater either. I mean, that's a football team. You should be in year 3 of your program. So that's the troubling thing. And it's like, you say, which way is your program trending? Getting better, getting worse? You're getting worse.
You know, one of the things, you look at excuses, and one of the things Jeremy Pruitt said multiple times in his first year here is, well, I got to get better players. Now, he's cut back on that, but that first year, he admitted, I got to get more 5 stars. I got to get better players in here. He's got better players than an Arkansas roster. There's no way around that. You can't say that anymore. You had the better roster last night. You went into that game saying we're healthier on the offensive line, which is supposed to be your key. And then there are the folks who say, well, it's because you don't have a quarterback. That's part of it. But I didn't see Dan Marino on the other sideline last night. I didn't see Tom Brady or Peyton Manning playing for Arkansas. I saw Felipe Franks, who, much like Tennessee quarterback, looks good for a couple series and then looks awful for a couple of series. You just flip the coin, you don't know what you're going to get. So to me, when you're looking at this and you're saying, okay, this could defend him, there aren't a lot of defenses at this point. How big does this, I mean, I had somebody last night tell me, okay, this goes in the Georgia State column because Georgia State's always going to be there. Is this one of these that's always going to be there? That, you know, you go and lose to Arkansas, it's hard to clean the blackboard with that one.
Well, I think so. I mean, because again, you get back to a situation where Sam Pittman did not inherit a really good situation at Arkansas. And so for him to come out, and they've had a nice win against Ole Miss, a nice win against Mississippi State. A lot of people thought this year they had a chance to go 0-8, and they have played pretty good football. I think they look like a pretty well-coached football team for the most part. So I do think it goes into that category. And the other thing I know Tennessee had a lot of people preseason that had COVID issues, but according to Jeremy Pruitt, they haven't had a COVID issue in the last 6-7 weeks maybe?
Yeah, he had false positives
this
week.
False positives, but so they're in pretty good shape in that regard. And I know there were some people that were out and didn't play last night against Arkansas, but still, that should not be a reason anymore. You had an open date to try to get better, and that's what you delivered.
Yes.
Not
Yes.
good.
Yeah, that's right. Coming off an open date, and that's what you get. The Chuck, when you look at this team, you know, it's one thing. Fans aren't happy about continuing to lose by 21 or more against your big 3 rivals, but at least your big 3 rivals are top 10, top 15 teams. You've lost to Kentucky and Arkansas in the same year. I think the only other time that's happened was 2011 under Derek Dooley, and things didn't end well for him. It's these losses. I mean, it's one thing to continue to get your butt kicked in your rivalry games, but when you lose to Arkansas and Kentucky, that's stuff fans don't forget.
And I know we've talked about how lopsided the score is in the second half. I look at the third quarter.
Well, we're going to get to that.
But what you're looking at is you're making the same mistakes. You're still not defending the slant. How many times did Arkansas hurt you with that? You giving up the inside release. You had an open date to fix some of those things. To me, that's pretty basic, isn't it? You go back and you watch the film, what are teams using to beat you? You know, they used the tight end some who was hobbling around. They threw a touchdown pass right over the middle to him. So you look at this, and the troubling thing, to me, I felt like in the second half I was watching a movie I hadn't seen before, and I didn't like the way it ended.
Will, in terms of improving things, Jeremy Pruitt got rid of his defensive line coach after 4 games. He's now coached the defensive line for 2 games in an open date. Have you seen any improvement on the defensive line?
No. I mean, the Arkansas game plan was pretty simple. The only reason they didn't do well in the first half is because they went away from the run and easy throws. Second half, the 17-play drive was just line up, play ball, turn your offensive lineman, hit the open hole. Hey, no problems. I mean, so you're not seeing an offensive or defensive line that can get off blocks. I mean, what you're seeing, and it's from Henry To'oTo'o to everybody down, they do really good on the offensive line, but they don't get off. So a stalemate by an offensive lineman on you, the defender, is a win when the running back runs past you. And so you just have a bunch of guys getting stuck on blocks and not getting off and not making plays. It's not good. They're not getting better.
Jimmy, what's your view from 1,000 feet up in terms of your head coach at this point? Do you look at it and say you wonder about his game management? Do you look at it and say, well, I wonder about his talent evaluation, player development, all the things that we talked good things about earlier? What are you focused most on right now? What do you say? Or is it just too scattershot to even pick one?
If I were to try to pick a couple of them, it would be game management because there's some things that occurred that I would do differently.
We'll talk about that in our why they were stupid category.
Yeah, so that's a part of it. The other thing is that while early in his tenure here, I looked and I saw players getting better, Nigel Warrior and some of these guys getting better. Well, I'm not seeing that much this year. The defensive linemen haven't gotten better. The linebackers typically haven't gotten better. The secondary's been atrocious for much of the year. I don't see a lot of folks getting better. And I thought this would be a coach and a staff that would be really good at player development compared to what Butch Jones turned out. But this year, I'm not seeing that.
Before the show, we were chatting. I don't want to put words in Josh Ward's mouth, but I believe he was talking about the fact that one thing that's changed from last year to this year is, a lot of those Butch Jones guys. Remember last year, everybody wanted to go to the youth movement, get rid of these old Jones guys. It was the Jones guys that played best last year. Now they're gone. Interestingly, the Jones guys showed more improvement under Pruitt than the Pruitt guys.
Yes.
So that doesn't bode well for the future. If it's the Butch guys, you're running thin on those guys at this point. You better learn to improve your own fellows. All right, when we come back, we're going to talk about the third quarter collapse. You're not going to believe some of the numbers from Tennessee in the third quarter this year, offense, defense. After halftime, I don't know what they're doing at halftime. We'll ask Will Overstreet. We'll also talk about the offensive line. Came out, looked good for a half, then turned back into a pumpkin. Is it time to just give up on expecting this offensive line to turn some sort of miraculous corner at this point? We got much more to come. Why they were stupid, Jeremy Pruitt and his job security at this point. A lot of stuff to cover. We're going to cover it. Come on back on the Sports Source.